Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota and I offer wisdom, tools, and support for personality integration. And today I'm going to be discussing the fact that when you know your personality type, how that actually really impacts your behavior. And I want to be diving into to what extent is this tool about the 8 cognitive functions, psychological types, personality typology, whatever you want to call it. To what extent is this tool impactful? Some of the things that I've observed. And I want to try my best to make sure that if you are a beginner, that this makes sense to you, but also that I am just sharing my observations for those of you who already have watched my videos for a while and you are really deep in the community and you understand the cognitive functions and all that. So just as a refresher, each of the 16 types, we have these 4 conscious cognitive functions that we identify with. Our ego identifies and says, this is me, this is my stack, this is my functioning. A lot of times in the MBTI community, if you think about what function do you use or what your top 4 are, that's what people are talking about. Like, those are the 4 cognitive functions out of the 8 that you identify with. But then on the other side of that, there are the 4 other functions that you don't identify with that are considered the shadow function. So do the types look and act differently if they are aware that there is such a thing as their shadow function, or that there is such a thing as like a dominant function and then a inferior function and all of that? How does that impact things? And the thing that inspired me about this and made me really reflect on how impactful this tool has been in my life is that recently I've started a business, a digital marketing and branding business with an ENFJ friend. And so we've been really working closely together, trying to, make things happen. And through the process, I've really been able to interact with another ENFJ, and I've never been able to do that in that way before, at least. I mean, I've had ENFJ friends, my dad's an ENFJ, but I have never been able to really like compare processes side by side, see like exactly like how our brains work similarly and differently when it comes to coming to a conclusion. And I have found that despite the fact that my my friend is extremely self-aware and has been interested in self-development for just as long, if not longer, than I have, I've noticed that the way that I have grown has been in the direction that I've literally read about since 2012 when I first discovered this. Since I was like almost 18, I was like 17, just graduated college. I'm now 25. I literally have been aware of the cognitive stack for that long. And so literally, I have intentionally tried to integrate my tertiary SE, my inferior TI. I have intentionally tried to integrate these things. And I saw that as the path to integration. And I do believe that there definitely is something to that. But what I've realized is that there's definitely more than one way to integrate. And I'm not so sure that we all naturally go in that path, or if that is just like sort of the suggested path. Because I noticed that my friend, who's an ENFJ, she, it seems as though she has integrated her FI and her NE, just like more than me. And it made me really just wonder, to what extent does the fact that I knew that this is the path and that, oh, I use FE and then NI and then SE and then TI, and so in order to be well-rounded, I need to make sure that I'm tapping all of these 4 things. Has that influenced me? And I would say yes, it has. And I want to talk about that and what I think some of the benefits of knowing that are. but also just to use my friend as a case study, as a perfectly functioning human being that has also, you know, not needed to really focus that much about SE and TI because she compensates for it, like, with her life. Like, it's not like that I'm not trying to, like, say her SE and TI are bad by any means. I mean, she's an ENFJ. She doesn't need to rely on that. And to some extent, there's something I can learn from that, in the sense that, you know, I should just embrace my dominant function and my auxiliary function. And it's been very interesting to see my friend describe me as the logical one out of the two of them, or out of the two of us, or things like that, or just like, it's been interesting to hear myself described as, oh, Megan's the one that is willing to, or she's the sort of person to start something and not get caught in analysis paralysis, and oh, she trusts her logic. Things like that, that I've never been referred to as that before. Those are my weaknesses. And I know that they are. And it's like, I was talking with her about this too, and I was like, you realize I have not always necessarily been that way. This is something that I actually learned through understanding the cognitive functions and understanding, like, oh, those are my weak spots. That's the reason why XYZ always happens to me. Maybe if I am aware and sort of like shine a light on these weaknesses, it, you know, it can help me, and it has helped me be more aware of the fact that they even exist, so that I can either walk around them or, you know, put some effort on them. Where, you know, and she's very into astrology and tarot and other self-development tools. So, you know, I've just been thinking and comparing lately, and I want to know your guys' thoughts. To what extent you think personality typology helps self-growth. I'm realizing that this tool is quite different than most tools. And I'm not really quite sure what category it fits in the sense that some people really talk about it as though it's science, some really talk about it as though it's psychology, some as philosophy. Personally, I'm just interested in the ways that it can help us grow and it can illuminate this path. And I do think that that path is, I guess, a path to integration, a path to balance, a path to figuring out how to navigate the waves in your life a little bit better, in the sense that if you don't, like, as an ENFJ, SE is the natural pairing for my NI. So every time my NI is a little out of balance, SE is the natural, like, balancer for it. NE doesn't necessarily balance it. Like, if I was going to then, like, I do personally, I believe that, you know, it's possible through the path of individuation. It is possible to become conscious, or at least slightly conscious, of all of the 8 functions, but only if, you know, it's only healthy if you still maintain your preferences. And I know that might be controversial for me to say, but I do, you know, believe that humanity, the psyche, it's kind of evolving right now. There's a lot changing in our species. I think that with the internet and with so many things going on, like even with climate change issues and other things like that, there's a lot of fear, yet there's a lot of people trying to rally together and have hope. And so with all this going on, all this chaos, it's sort of stretching us to, like, grow, really. Like, all the chaos around us in society is helping our species grow if we choose to see it in that way. And I think that we don't even use, like, we don't use all of our brains as humans. It doesn't make any sense to think that we can't tap into all of the 8 cognitive functions at some point. The more I get to know my ENFP close friends, the more I begin to understand, like, where their functions are coming from, despite the fact that they are different than my functions. And, like, the more I understand what their FI looks like, the easier it is to identify the FI within myself. But to go back to what I was saying earlier, I think that, you know, TI is the natural sort of missing puzzle piece that FE is looking for, whereas SE is that puzzle piece for NI. So if you are an ENFJ, it makes total sense for your development to get a better understanding of what your tertiary and inferior functions are. It helps to talk to people who have those functions strongly and ask them, how do you process? What is your life like? What sort of problems do you get into? What do you use your functions for? What does it feel like to be you? What does a typical day look like? Anything, like, or even just observing them or consuming content from them, just getting a taste of their worldview. It really helps to see what it is that is lacking in you through the comparison of seeing, like, when I talk to SPs, it's like, oh man, my SE really is not great. Like, and I think that we can trick ourselves into thinking that we're better at our functions than we are. And I think for the people who are not even aware that they have a personality type and they're not aware of the cognitive functions, nobody likes to feel like a failure. Nobody wants to feel like they're broken or flawed. And so I think that we naturally, without being aware of the system, can try and kind of compensate or hide our weaknesses, even if we don't realize that's what we're doing, in this sense where feelers don't want to feel stupid and thinkers don't want to feel like they're bad people. And these are just these sort of things that cover us. We cover up that area because we're afraid of what it would be like if we were to dive in and realize that there's a part of us that's broken. And we're all broken, yet not broken at the same time, in the sense that that's how our species was made. For whatever reason, there's these 16 patterns of cognition that we tend to have. We see it, we feel it. Those of you who are in the personality typology community and into the system, you've seen the dynamics and the patterns, and it's really quite fascinating that for whatever reason we were put on Earth this way, where some of us, like, we're really good at some things and really shitty at other things. And, you know, to me, that's a symbol that, you know, we need each other. Not to get on my ENFJ soapbox here, but you know what? Why not? I'm gonna get on that ENFJ soapbox because it's what I do best. We do need each other because we are a little bit broken, and there are different aspects to other people who are the missing piece for what we lack. And that's beautiful. Like, that's beautiful. And I think that understanding that is beautiful, and it can help your connections with others as well. When you understand, like, for example, if I, as an ENFJ, were to be unaware of cognitive functions and not know about my own strengths and weaknesses, perhaps I were to meet an ISTP just out in the wild, and they were to say some things. They were to either correct me, or maybe I am thinking through, like, I don't know what I think about this, and then the ISTP comes along with the answer. If I was not aware that, oh, my SE and TI suck, and their TI and SE are really good, so that's why, If I wasn't aware of that, then maybe I would think, oh my goodness, I'm stupid. Oh my goodness, I'm slow. Oh my goodness, that person's better than me. And oh my goodness, we do this constantly with people. Even those of you who know personality type, honestly, you guys should know better. If you're still doing this and you know that nobody's good at everything. You know, we all are made a little bit broken with a little piece of us that is lacking to some extent, you know, and we don't need it because we don't need to be everything, because how we were created, we weren't intended to be everything. We were intended to work as a whole, as a unit. We were intended to, you know, we're a social species. I mean, science has proven that. For whatever reason, people are still doubtful of that because of the way that individualism and capitalism has impacted everything. However, we are a social species. Nobody can do it alone. Nobody is perfect, and everybody is a little bit broken. Everyone has some functions that are stronger than others, and that's just how it is. And I think that if we are aware of this and we can relieve ourselves of the burden of expecting ourselves to be all of the things that we're not. I am not an SI user. It's always going to be a struggle for me no matter how much I grow. I can do my best to, you know, be my best self, but I'm never going to be an SI user. If I can relieve myself of the burden of needing to meet the standard that high SI users set, then I'm free. Then I can be done comparing myself to others, and I can understand the beauty in the SI users and not feel judged by them. Because they offer something that I lack. That's beautiful, right? Like, that's beautiful. And I offer something that they lack. So why is that a problem? You know? Why do we make that a problem? I don't quite understand. And I wish that more people can learn this tool, and I'll explain a little bit more on that later, but it's like I wish that if more people could learn this tool, then they can recognize their own strengths and weaknesses, relieve themselves of the burden of being perfect, and stop expecting yourself, or stop holding yourself to every single standard of, I need to be very extroverted and I need to be very introverted. I need to have a rich inner world and a rich outer world. And I need to be very intellectual and thoughtful and know the logic behind everything. And I need to have this rich emotional world and be so, you know, perfect with expressing my values all the time. You know, it just, like, understanding where you stand, understanding where you can grow, and also understanding what is magical about you. What is the part of you that is, you just got a little extra sprinkle of compared to others that don't share that. Like, you could think of your dominant function like that, is that you were made with a little extra sprinkle of that, you know? How can you use that to good use? Like, for you guys who are TI dominants, INTPs and ISTPs, how can you use your big brain and put it to good use? How can you use that tinkering and put that to good use? You know, how, if you're an introverted feeling dominant, how could you use, you know, your introverted feeling, your personal sense of values and everything that means to you? How can you make the most of that? Every dominant function, you can make the most of it and you can love it because it's beautiful. Like, it's beautiful as it is. And, you know, I think that we can humble ourselves when we can relieve ourselves of the burden of needing to be perfect at our weaknesses, and we can stop judging others who trigger our weaknesses and trigger our shadow. Like, for example, you know, before I really understood as much as I do now about the cognitive functions, I probably would just see an STJ and think that they were evil and dull, because they process so differently than me that I would just think, like, are you dense? Are you, do you have a heart? Like, do you care that I'm here? And I know that sounds harsh, and if you're an ESTJ or ISTJ, like, I apologize for saying that, and hopefully you guys understand, because I'm probably really alien to you as well. So I don't mean that personally whatsoever. But I think that we come across people all the time that trigger our shadows and our weaknesses, and it could be infuriating if you don't know how to see the beauty in that. Because now that I've relieved myself of the pressure of being perfect in every area, I can actually see the beauty in introverted sensing, and I can learn from it. I can watch it work, and I can admire it, and I can compliment it, and I can thank it for existing. Thank you for what you do, because I recognize, you know, based on my life, how useful it is and how hard it is to exist without that. And also, if you grow your emotional intelligence and understanding, you can ask those people for help. The very same people that would trigger you if you were not aware are now the people that you can learn the most from, and they're the people that should be, you guys can both have this symbiotic relationship of learning from each other. Like, opposite functions don't need to mean that you hate each other. It doesn't need to mean that there's conflict. That only happens when we refuse to accept ourselves, and we don't know how to orient ourselves, and we haven't accepted our own weaknesses. So going back to sort of what I was saying earlier, I do believe that this tool is extremely impactful, especially if you are interested in going down the individuation process that Carl Jung talks about, where you are integrating the collective unconscious and your shadow into your self, which the self is different than the ego. The self includes the collective unconscious. The self is ironically something bigger than your conscious self. And you know, other people are an extension of you in many ways, and a lot of the shadow work that you might hear about involves looking at other people, and, you know, no matter what you feel about them, or no matter what emotions it brings up in you, maybe you think they're wrong, maybe you think they're stupid, maybe you think you would have done it differently. Think about what it brings up in you and what that means to you. Are they representing something that is a weakness in you? Because you can transform that emotion from judgment to admiration pretty quickly. Well, not pretty quickly, I guess. If your weakness is feeling, I understand that transforming your emotion pretty quickly might actually be pretty hard. So if you're interested in that topic as well, please feel free to ask me as many questions as possible, or give me as many video topics around that so that I can explain it deeper, because I want everyone to understand, and I don't want to sound like just some feeler patronizing and acting like, oh, it's so easy for me. It's like I said, I got a little extra sprinkle dust of FE. That's just how I was built. So that's a lot to think about. Personality typology is the only tool that does this, at least in the same way, because we're focused on the mind, your cognition. It's different than focusing on astrology or tarot or Enneagram. It's different than any other personal development tool in the fact that it could be used in that way. And this conversation's definitely not over. There's a lot more that could be said about this. And I definitely don't have all the answers, but I do want to continue to have this discussion more frequently in the future. So thank you for watching. If you're interested in any sort of mentorship where I can take you through the individuation and integration process using your cognitive functions, I do have mentorship available. And I also offer personality typing services. What else? Check out the links below. On Patreon right now, I'm releasing sort of as I go the 16 personality type descriptions, so you can become a member of my Patreon if you want to have access to those. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.